The alien warriors moved silently through the dense jungle, their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. They were a highly trained hunting squad, known for their ruthless efficiency and their pride in capturing the most elusive prey in the galaxy. To them, a lone human soldier stranded on this wild planet was nothing more than an easy target. They had hunted creatures far more dangerous, or so they thought. Their tracking devices beeped quietly, locking onto faint heat signatures in the distance. The commander grinned beneath his mask. He had heard stories of humans, frail, weak beings who relied on their technology to survive. Their prey wouldn't stand a chance. As they approached the source of the signal, the jungle seemed to close in on them, its thick foliage creating an eerie silence. They could hear their own breathing, feel the humid air clinging to their skin. The commander signaled his team to spread out and surround the area. The hunt was about to begin. In the heart of the jungle, the soldier crouched, listening. She had been trained for this, survival in the harshest of conditions. Her mind raced as she pieced together the clues left behind by the alien hunters. She knew they were close. They were fast, but she was faster. They had technology, but she had instincts. The soldier was no ordinary fighter. She had been through countless battles, and each one had taught her something new. This time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about winning. The aliens might think they were hunting her, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. They moved in closer, the alien warriors confident in their tracking abilities. They couldn't see her yet, but their equipment told them she was nearby. As they advanced, one of them stumbled upon a small, disturbed patch of dirt. He knelt down, inspecting it, but before he could call out to his commander, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. The trap had been set perfectly. A primitive device by their standards, but deadly nonetheless. The warrior's body crumpled as the other aliens froze in their tracks, momentarily stunned by the sudden loss of one of their own. They quickly regrouped, but the damage was done. The first hint of fear crept into their minds. The soldier watched from the shadows, observing their reactions. She wasn't going to fight them head-on, that would be foolish. She had studied their tactics, learned their weaknesses. They were too confident, too reliant on their tech to guide them. She, on the other hand, had learned to trust the jungle, to let it conceal her, to use it against her enemies. As the aliens moved more cautiously now, the commander barked orders, trying to maintain control. They were still convinced they had the upper hand, but something was different now. Their easy prey had just taken down one of their own, and they didn't even know how. Their heat trackers weren't picking up anything but the jungle's own warm breath. A faint rustle from the canopy above drew their attention, but by the time they looked up, the soldier had already moved. She was a ghost, slipping through the underbrush, leaving only the faintest trace behind. The jungle was her ally, its dense cover providing her with all the protection she needed. The aliens tried to adapt, switching their tactics, scanning for any signs of movement, but she was always one step ahead. They didn't understand yet, but they were no longer the hunters. She was leading them, drawing them deeper into her territory. Another trap snapped shut, taking down a second warrior. This one had been quick, but not quick enough. The remaining warriors fired blindly into the trees, frustration and fear now clouding their judgment. They were making mistakes, and she was ready to capitalize on every single one. The commander snarled, furious at how the hunt was unfolding. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be weak, predictable. But this soldier was different. She was calculating, precise. Each move she made was deliberate, designed to chip away at their numbers, their morale. She watched as the commander rallied his troops again, trying to restore their shaken confidence. They still thought they could outlast her, that their superior numbers and weapons would win the day. But the soldier knew better. She didn't need to fight them all at once. She would pick them off, one by one. She moved silently through the undergrowth, her senses heightened. Every sound, every shift in the air told her where they were. They were close, but they wouldn't find her until she wanted them to. She was in control now, not them. As the aliens fanned out in search of her, she struck again, this time from the trees. A perfectly placed shot took down the next warrior, his body falling hard to the ground. The remaining hunters spun in confusion, unsure where the attack had come from. Their technology couldn't save them here. They were in her world now, and she had become something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The soldier remained hidden, watching as the alien warriors regrouped once more. They were growing desperate now, their movements becoming erratic. She could hear their strained breathing, their rapid heartbeats. They were afraid. And that fear was her greatest weapon. The commander growled orders, but his voice no longer carried the same authority. His warriors had seen their comrades fall, had felt the creeping dread that came with being hunted. They were supposed to be the apex predators, but now they were starting to doubt. The soldier remained calm, focused. She had them exactly where she wanted them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about dominance, about proving that no matter how advanced their technology, no matter how skilled they thought they were, she was better. As the aliens retreated deeper into the jungle, they unknowingly walked into her next trap. One by one they would fall, until only the commander was left, and by then, he would know the truth. She wasn't the prey. She was the apex predator. The commander cursed under his breath as he surveyed the scene. Another one of his warriors had fallen, and the soldier remained unseen. This hunt was becoming something far worse than they had anticipated. They were supposed to be the elite, the best in their ranks. They had faced more formidable foes, yet here they were, being outmaneuvered by a single human. He motioned for the rest of his team to gather. Their faces, hidden behind helmets, showed signs of growing fear and uncertainty. They had underestimated her. They all had. But now they would change tactics. The commander's pride, however, wouldn't allow him to admit they were being bested. Not yet. The alien warriors switched to a more cautious approach. Instead of relying on their technology to guide them, they began using old hunting methods. They spread out, but this time with more precision, covering each other's blind spots. It was a strategy that had worked for them countless times before. The commander felt a small surge of confidence. They would flush her out. They had to. But the soldier had anticipated this. She watched from the shadows, silently observing their every move. She knew they would adapt, just as she had. But their biggest mistake was thinking that they could still win with brute force and numbers. She had already seen through them, understanding their every decision. What they didn't realize was that she had already laid her next trap. The alien squad moved through the jungle, tighter now, more coordinated, but their nerves were fraying. The commander barked orders to keep them steady, but the tension was palpable. Every snap of a branch or rustle in the underbrush made them twitch, weapons at the ready. They didn't know it yet, but fear was already eroding their discipline. One of the warriors took a step too far from his comrades. It was a small mistake, barely noticeable, but it was all she needed. The soldier acted without hesitation, striking from the shadows with the same precision as before. By the time the others noticed he was gone, it was already too late. The commander whipped around, scanning the area, but saw nothing. His frustration was mounting. How could they be losing so quickly, so easily? He ordered his team to regroup again, realizing that their tight formation wasn't enough. She wasn't just picking them off, she was controlling the battlefield, dictating every movement. The alien hunters were slowly realizing they were no longer in charge. She was hunting them, and they had walked right into her domain. Each of her strikes was calculated, designed to inflict maximum damage with minimal effort. They weren't just losing warriors, they were losing their grip on the situation. The soldier kept her distance, watching them scramble. She could see the cracks forming in their unit, the growing uncertainty in their actions. This was where she excelled, psychological warfare. She didn't need to overpower them physically. She was breaking them down, piece by piece, mentally and emotionally. Another alien warrior fell, this time to one of her more elaborate traps. It was a combination of the environment and a clever use of her limited resources. The soldier knew she couldn't rely on brute strength or firepower. She didn't need to. She had the jungle, and the jungle was enough. The commander's anger was boiling over now. He could feel the fear spreading through his team like a virus. Every time they regrouped, they had fewer numbers. And the worst part was that they still hadn't seen her. She was like a ghost, moving through the trees without a trace, always staying one step ahead of them. He tried to think logically, to maintain control. He ordered his team to stay closer, tighter, their weapons ready. But even he couldn't deny that things were spiraling out of control. This human was no ordinary soldier. She was methodical, ruthless. She was everything they had believed themselves to be. The surviving warriors were no longer just hunting, they were on edge, panicked. They whispered to each other in short, clipped phrases, their fear barely contained. The commander could feel the shift. His once proud team was coming apart. They had thought of themselves as invincible, and now, one by one, they were being taken out like prey. The soldier's tactics were simple yet effective. She used every advantage she had, from the terrain to their own arrogance. Each move was a reminder that they were out of their element, that their advanced technology and superior numbers meant nothing here. They were just as vulnerable as any creature in the wild. The commander realized this too late. He had been so focused on finding her, so sure of his team's abilities, that he had ignored the signs. Now, he was leading what was left of his warriors into a fight they couldn't win. They weren't just losing, they were being hunted. The remaining warriors huddled together, their breathing labored, their eyes wide with fear. They had been trained to fight under pressure, but this was different. They weren't used to being the ones who didn't know where the next attack would come from. It was driving them mad, and the soldier knew it. She watched them from her hidden vantage point, noting their every move. They were scared now, truly scared. They were no longer the proud hunters they had been when they first landed on this planet. Now they were just trying to survive, and she had all the time in the world. The soldier knew the final moments were approaching. She had whittled down their numbers, broken their morale. All that was left was the final blow, and she would strike when the moment was right. The commander would be the last to fall, and when he did, he would understand. She wasn't just a soldier fighting to survive. She was the predator. The air was thick with tension. The commander could feel it in the way his remaining warriors moved, their steps unsure, their eyes darting from side to side. They were trying to keep calm, but the fear had taken root deep within them. No matter how hard they tried to suppress it, the reality was clear. They were no longer the hunters. They were being hunted, and the realization was starting to tear them apart. He clenched his fists, anger pulsing through him. They had been trained for this. They had the best technology, the best skills. Yet, here they were, reduced to a desperate, scattered group, falling victim to a single human soldier. The soldier wasn't just hiding, she was orchestrating their downfall with a precision that unnerved him. Another one of his warriors moved too far ahead. The commander tried to call him back, but it was too late. A sharp, sudden noise cut through the jungle, and the warrior was gone, taken down as easily as the others. The commander didn't even have time to react. It was like watching a predator cull the weak from a herd, removing them one by one until there was nothing left. He turned to the last two members of his team. They stood frozen, their weapons drawn, but the terror in their eyes was unmistakable. They were waiting for her next move, dreading it, knowing that their numbers were dwindling. The jungle felt like it was closing in on them, suffocating and full of unseen dangers. Every rustle of leaves, every breath of wind felt like a threat. The soldier was out there, somewhere, watching them, waiting for the perfect moment. And the commander knew that they were powerless to stop her. Their advanced weapons, their armor, their strategies, they all seemed useless now. They had been so confident, so sure of their superiority, but this jungle had turned against them, and she had used it to her advantage. He tried to steady his mind, to think of a plan, but nothing came. Every idea seemed futile, every tactic too little, too late. They were in her territory now, playing by her rules, and he knew deep down that the only reason they were still alive was because she allowed it. One of the remaining warriors snapped under the pressure, firing his weapon wildly into the trees, his panic overtaking him. The commander barked at him to stop, but the damage was already done. The sound of the gunfire echoed through the jungle, and then everything went quiet again. Too quiet. The commander's pulse quickened. He knew what was coming. The soldier wouldn't waste time now. She had them where she wanted them, scared, disorganized, and ripe for the taking. And just like that, she struck again. It was over in seconds. The panicked warrior didn't even have time to scream before he was silenced, leaving only the commander and one other left. The commander's breath came in shallow, ragged bursts. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced. He wasn't just fighting to win anymore, he was fighting to survive, and it was a battle he was losing. He had always prided himself on his strength, his ability to lead his team through anything. But now, all of that seemed meaningless. She had outplayed him from the start, and he knew it. This human soldier, whom they had considered an easy target, had turned the entire hunt into a nightmare. She wasn't just skilled, she was relentless, cold, and methodical. Every move she made was with purpose, every strike designed to dismantle them piece by piece. The last warrior looked to the commander, fear written all over his face. The commander could see it, the desperation, the unspoken plea for a way out. But there was no escape. The soldier had ensured that. She had cut off every route, leaving them with only one option, to fight her on her terms, and that was a fight they couldn't win. The commander gestured for the last warrior to stay close. They had to stick together if they had any chance at all. But in his gut, he knew it wouldn't be enough. The soldier had already won. This was her game now, and they were just playing out the final moves. Time passed, though it was hard to say how long. Every second felt like an eternity. The jungle, once full of life and sound, had grown deathly silent. It was as if even the wildlife knew what was happening, as if the jungle itself had chosen sides. And then, the inevitable happened. The last warrior was taken, swiftly and silently. The commander didn't even see it. One moment, his soldier was there, and the next, he was gone. The commander was alone now, the only one left. His entire team, his best warriors, had been wiped out without ever laying eyes on their enemy. He stood in the middle of the jungle, his weapon at the ready, though he knew it was pointless. He was the last one, and she was coming for him. The commander's hands shook, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He had never felt this way before, so utterly helpless, so completely outmatched. And then, from the shadows, she emerged. He finally saw her, just a glimpse, but enough to know that everything he had thought about humans had been wrong. She wasn't weak. She wasn't prey. She was something far more dangerous. She was the apex predator, and he was just another victim. The commander tried to raise his weapon, but his hands wouldn't cooperate. His mind was screaming at him to fight, to defend himself, but his body had already accepted defeat. He had lost this battle long ago, from the moment they had underestimated her. As she moved closer, the commander knew there was no escape. She had planned it all perfectly, led them into a trap from which there was no way out. And now, she would finish what she had started. In that final moment, as the commander stared into the eyes of his hunter, he understood the truth. The human soldier had never been the prey. She had always been the predator, and they had never stood a chance. The commander stood alone, his breath shallow and uneven. He could feel the weight of the jungle pressing in on him, the oppressive silence surrounding him like a predator watching its prey. He had no more soldiers to command, no team to rely on. They were all gone, taken one by one without ever seeing their attacker. He had thought he could outlast her, that his experience and training would see him through. But now, facing the reality of his situation, he understood how wrong he had been. The soldier had picked them apart, breaking their morale, exploiting their fear. And now she had him exactly where she wanted him, alone, vulnerable, and with no hope of escape. He tightened his grip on his weapon, trying to steel himself for what was to come, but deep down, he knew it was futile. The hunt was over, and he was the last one left to fall. As he scanned the jungle, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, he could feel her presence. She was there, somewhere, watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She hadn't rushed her attacks, hadn't given in to impatience. Each of his warriors had fallen because she had taken her time, carefully choosing when and how to strike. The commander knew that his time was almost up. He had never experienced anything like this. His whole life had been spent on the battlefield, leading his troops to victory after victory. They had hunted countless enemies, always with the confidence that their superior technology and tactics would see them through. But now, with his entire team gone, that confidence had been shattered. He wasn't leading anyone anymore. He was just trying to survive. The soldier had never been just a target. She had been the real threat from the beginning. He realized that now. She had allowed them to think they were in control, let them believe that their hunt was proceeding as planned. But every step they had taken, every decision they had made, had been part of her plan. She had turned the jungle into her weapon, using it to disorient them, to push them further into confusion and fear. And now, there was nowhere left for him to go. The commander tried to calm his mind, tried to think of a way out, but the panic was setting in. His breathing quickened, his muscles tensed. He knew that she was close, closer than ever before. Every second felt like an eternity as he waited for the inevitable, his senses heightened, yet still failing to pinpoint her location. He knew she was toying with him now, savoring the moment. She had taken out the others quickly, efficiently, but with him, she was dragging it out. He was the last one, and she was making sure he knew it. The commander's heart pounded in his chest, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't stop the fear from creeping in. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Suddenly, there was a shift in the air. He sensed her before he saw her, just a brief movement in the periphery of his vision. Instinctively, he raised his weapon, but it was too late. She was on him before he could react, a blur of speed and precision. The commander fired blindly, but she moved with such efficiency that his shots went wide, hitting nothing but empty air. She was close now, close enough for him to see the determination in her eyes, the cold calculation in every movement she made. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. She was everything he had once believed himself to be, unstoppable, focused, and in control. But unlike him, she wasn't burdened by pride or overconfidence. She was simply better. In those final moments, the commander understood what had happened. He had never been in control. From the moment they had set foot in the jungle, she had been playing a different game. She had turned the tables on them, turned their hunt into her own, and there had been nothing they could do to stop her. She struck with precision, disarming him in seconds. He stumbled, his weapon clattering to the ground, and he knew that it was over. He was at her mercy, and there would be no mercy. She had planned it all from the start, and now she would finish it. The commander stood frozen, his mind racing, but his body refusing to move. There was nothing left for him to do but accept his fate. With a final, calculated movement, she ended it. The commander crumpled to the ground, the weight of defeat heavier than any injury. He had been outmatched in every way, not just physically, but mentally. She had anticipated every move, every thought, and dismantled him piece by piece. As he lay there, staring up at the jungle canopy, he realized that she wasn't just a soldier. She was a predator, the apex predator, and he had been nothing more than prey. The jungle returned to its eerie quiet, as if it had been holding its breath for this moment. The soldier stood over him for a brief second, her face impassive, before vanishing into the dense foliage. She moved as if she was part of the jungle itself, leaving no trace of her presence behind. The commander, in his final moments, could only marvel at the sheer ruthlessness of her efficiency. In the end, it wasn't her strength or her weapons that had defeated them. It was her mind, her ability to think beyond the obvious, to use everything at her disposal to turn the odds in her favor. The commander had thought he understood the nature of the hunt, but this human had shown him something else entirely. She had redefined what it meant to be a predator. As his vision faded, the commander felt the weight of his own arrogance, the realization that they had never stood a chance. The human soldier had not only survived, she had dominated, outwitted, and ultimately defeated them. And now, as the jungle swallowed him whole, she remained the undisputed apex predator, the one who had outlasted them all. The jungle's oppressive silence returned as the soldier melted into the dense foliage. The commander's lifeless body lay still, a testament to her ruthless efficiency. She had outlasted them all, one by one. But something was off. There was a change in the air. The soldier's instinct, finely tuned from years of battle, sensed it immediately. This hunt wasn't over. As she moved deeper into the jungle, she felt it, eyes on her, tracking her movements, but not from where she expected. A faint rustling overhead drew her attention. She paused, muscles tensed, scanning the treetops. It wasn't just the alien warriors. There was something else out there, something different, something more dangerous than the aliens. A flash of movement. She turned just in time, dodging a swift and silent attack. The figure that lunged at her wasn't one of the alien warriors. It was faster, sleeker, more deadly. Its armor shimmered with advanced camouflage, blending into the jungle perfectly. She barely had time to process before another attack came, this time from behind. She parried, using her knife to deflect the blow, but whoever, or whatever, this was, it was skilled. She finally caught a glimpse of her new enemy. It wasn't an alien, but a human in high-tech gear far beyond anything she had seen. The realization hit her. She wasn't the only human here. This was another hunter, but one equipped with technology leagues ahead of anything she'd ever used. And they weren't here by accident. The figure stepped back, circling her cautiously, watching for any sign of weakness. She could tell this was no ordinary soldier. This was someone who had trained for situations like this, someone who had been sent for a specific purpose. The soldier didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, closing the distance between them in an instant, her knife flashing. The new hunter blocked, but there was a slight hesitation, a fraction of a second where she sensed an opening. Her instincts screamed at her to press the attack. She swung low, aiming for the vulnerable spot under the high-tech armor, and made contact. The blade found flesh, and the figure staggered back, gasping in pain. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice low, steady. She kept her knife raised, ready for another attack. The wounded figure remained silent, but in that brief moment she saw a flicker of something familiar in their eyes, determination, yes, but also fear. The soldier's mind raced. There was more to this than just a hunt. Someone had sent this human, and it wasn't for the same reason as the aliens. The figure pressed something on their wrist, and a holographic projection blinked to life. It showed her face, detailed schematics of her movements, her tactics. They had been tracking her, not just the aliens. This new hunter had been sent specifically for her. "They sent you for me," she muttered, piecing it together. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a setup. Someone out there had wanted to see how she would fare against both the alien hunters and one of their own. She had been a test. Her thoughts snapped back to the figure in front of her, who was struggling to stay upright. Whoever sent them hadn't counted on her being this good. They had underestimated her, just like the aliens had. And now, it was clear, she wasn't just being hunted. She was the ultimate target. Without warning, another figure emerged from the jungle, this one heavily armed and moving with lethal precision. It wasn't an alien. It was another human, dressed in similar advanced armor, part of the same team. The wounded figure gestured to the newcomer, trying to call for help, but it was too late. The soldier moved faster, striking the second hunter with a brutal efficiency that ended the fight before it could even begin. She stood over them, the jungle quiet again. But the silence was different now. It wasn't the peace of a victorious battle, it was the calm before a storm. Her mind raced with possibilities. Who had sent them? Why had they chosen her? There were no answers here, only more questions. Suddenly, a transmission crackled in her earpiece, something she hadn't expected after days of silence. It was her own command, her superiors. "You've done well, soldier," the voice said, calm and cold. "Return to base." She froze. They had been watching the whole time. This was a game to them, a test of her abilities, her limits. The aliens had been bait, and the real hunt was for her. The two hunters were never meant to survive, they were tools to evaluate her strength. And now, they wanted her to come back. But something had shifted inside her. The realization that she had been nothing more than a pawn in a larger game gnawed at her. They had used her, set her up to be hunted, all to see how far she could go. She glanced down at the bodies of the hunters, her supposed allies, and knew what she had to do. Instead of responding to the transmission, she switched off her earpiece, letting the static fade away. She wasn't going back. They had created an apex predator, and now they would have to deal with the consequences. She was no longer just a soldier. She had outgrown their control. The jungle closed in around her once more, but this time, she felt no fear. She had become something else entirely, something unstoppable. She wasn't just a survivor or a predator anymore. She was the apex, and the ones who had sent her here had no idea what they had unleashed.